I remember the first time my daughter called me a burden. It was a Sunday afternoon, sunlight slipping softly through the kitchen curtains, the kind of day that should have felt peaceful. But there was a heaviness in the air, one that I couldn't quite name back then. I was sitting at the old wooden table, peeling potatoes for the stew, when Emily sighed so loud that even the birds outside seemed to stop for a moment. She didn't look at me when she said it. She just muttered under her breath, "I can't keep taking care of you like this, Mom. You're becoming a burden." The knife slipped in my hand and the potato fell into the sink. I didn't bleed, but my heart did. I had never imagined that love could sound so cold coming from your own child. I looked at her, my girl, my only one, and for the first time, I saw a stranger where my little girl used to stand. She was tired, I told myself. She was stressed. Maybe I was imagining the sting in her tone. But even as I tried to brush it away, her words stayed inside me like a splinter. Back then, I still lived with her. After her father died, I sold our small house and moved into her guest room. I told myself it was temporary, just until I could find my footing. But the truth was, I liked being near her. I liked waking up to the sound of her making coffee, hearing her talk about her work, seeing her smile when she got texts from her boyfriend. I thought being close would bring us comfort. I thought grief shared was grief halved. But grief doesn't always bring people together. Sometimes, it builds walls. Emily started staying out later. She'd come home smelling like wine and perfume that wasn't hers. I didn't ask questions. Mothers can read between silences. When she was younger, she used to crawl into my lap and whisper, "Mommy, you're my best friend." Now, she barely said good morning. I still tried to help, folding her laundry, tidying up, cooking dinner, but each small act only seemed to irritate her more. "You don't have to do everything, Mom," she'd say sharply. "I'm not a kid anymore." One night, I overheard her on the phone with her friend. "I just feel trapped," she said. "I can't live my life with her always here." My breath caught in my throat. I stood in the hallway, clutching my robe tight, listening to the child I'd once rocked to sleep talk about me like I was a problem to be solved. That night I cried quietly into my pillow. Not because of what she said, but because I realized how much I had leaned on her without knowing. Maybe she really was tired. Maybe I'd forgotten that she had her own life to live. The thought crushed me, but I promised myself I would change. The next morning, I woke up early and made breakfast, pancakes, just like she liked when she was a kid. She didn't eat. She just grabbed her keys and said she'd eat at work. I stood there, spatula in hand, staring at the stack of pancakes growing cold on the counter. The syrup dripped slowly, like time melting away. Days turned into weeks, and we became polite strangers sharing the same roof. I began to keep to my room, reading old letters, sewing, pretending I didn't hear the laughter from her phone when she talked to someone new. I could feel her pulling away, thread by thread, until all that tied us together was our shared name. Then one day, she came home early, her face pale. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk?" For a brief moment, I thought she might apologize. But instead, she told me she was moving out, to a new apartment, with her boyfriend. "You'll be fine here, right?" she asked. I nodded, even though my chest felt hollow. "Of course, honey. I'll be fine." When she left that weekend, I stood by the window and watched her car disappear down the street. The silence that followed was the kind that screams. Months went by. She called sometimes, mostly short, hurried calls, always with an excuse to hang up. I tried not to bother her. I learned to cook for one, to sleep on the quiet side of the bed. The loneliness was sharp, but familiar. Then came the illness. It started with fatigue, then dizziness, then the doctor's face growing serious as he explained the words chronic kidney disease. I remember sitting in that sterile room, my hands cold, my mind blank. He said my kidneys were failing, that I'd need dialysis soon. I nodded, pretending to understand, but inside I felt like a building quietly crumbling. I didn't tell Emily right away. She had her own life, her own happiness. I didn't want to drag her back into my shadow. So I went to my appointments alone. I learned how to hook myself up to the dialysis machine at home. I smiled through the nausea and the exhaustion. The neighbors would sometimes drive me to the clinic, and I'd thank them with cookies I barely had the energy to bake. But no matter how strong I tried to be, sickness has a way of revealing loneliness like light through a cracked door. I missed my daughter's voice, her laughter, even her irritation. So one evening, I called her. "Hi, sweetheart," I said, forcing cheer into my tone. "How are you?" She sounded distracted, typing something in the background. When I told her about the diagnosis, there was a pause. A long one. Then she said, "Oh, Mom, that's terrible. But I'm sure the doctors will take care of you, right?" I wanted her to say she'd come. That she'd visit. That she'd hold my hand like I held hers when she scraped her knee as a child. But she didn't. She promised to call again soon. She didn't. The days got longer, the nights colder. Dialysis drained not just my blood but my will. Still, I endured. I'd sit by the window and watch the sunset bleed into the sky, whispering little prayers that she was happy, wherever she was. Then one morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was her, but her voice was trembling. "Mom," she whispered, "I'm at the hospital. They say my kidneys are failing. They are bad." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. Then she began to sob. "They said I need a transplant. I'm on the list, but they don't know when." Her voice broke. "I'm scared, Mom." Something inside me shifted. All those months of distance, of hurt, of silence, they vanished in that instant. Because no matter how much pain she'd caused me, she was still my child. And a mother's love doesn't retire. It waits. Quietly. Patiently. I told her I'd come right away. My body was frail, my steps slow, but my heart moved faster than it had in years. When I arrived at the hospital, she looked smaller than I remembered. Pale, frightened, fragile, like the little girl who used to hide behind my skirt during thunderstorms. She tried to smile, but tears welled up. "Mom," she whispered, "I didn't know who else to call." I took her hand and said, "You called the right person." 4 days, I stayed by her side. The doctors talked about compatibility tests, donors, waiting lists. They said it could take months, maybe years. Emily cried at night when she thought I was asleep. But mothers don't sleep through their children's pain. So I asked to be tested. Quietly, without telling her. When the results came back, the doctor looked at me like he wasn't sure if he should speak. "You're a match," he said. "But given your own condition, it's risky, extremely risky." I thought of all the risks I had taken for her before, the sleepless nights, the jobs I worked, the meals I skipped so she could have more. What was one more? I told the doctor to proceed. I didn't tell Emily what I had done. She already carried enough guilt in her eyes. I just told her to rest, to trust the process, and to believe that miracles still happen. She nodded weakly, not knowing that the miracle she was praying for was sitting right beside her, holding her hand. The night before the surgery, I couldn't sleep. The hospital corridors hummed softly with machines, footsteps, and distant beeps. I sat by the window, looking at the city lights. They reminded me of the nights I used to wait for her to come home safe when she was a teenager. I remembered sitting up with a cup of tea that had long gone cold, whispering to myself, "She's my girl. She'll come back." And now, here I was again, waiting, but this time, I didn't know if I'd wake up after this. I thought of all the moments we'd lost. Her first heartbreak that she never told me about. The day she graduated, and I sat in the back, watching from a distance while her friends' parents cheered loudly. The birthdays I spent waiting for a call that came hours too late. I realized then that love is strange. It survives even when it isn't returned. It becomes quieter, deeper, something almost sacred. When the nurse came in to prep me for surgery, she asked if I was sure. I smiled. A mother's never unsure about saving her child. She didn't say anything, but her eyes softened. They wheeled me into the sterile, bright room. The lights above looked like moons lined up in a white sky. I felt the chill of the metal table beneath me, the sting of the needle, the hum of machines. My last thought before the anesthesia took me was of Emily's little hand gripping mine when she was a baby. I whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." When I woke up, everything hurt. My throat was dry, my body felt hollow, and my side burned like fire. But when I turned my head and saw her through the glass, lying there, breathing, alive, the pain didn't matter. The nurse smiled. "She's doing well," she said softly. "Both of you are." I nodded weakly, tears slipping from the corners of my eyes. I wasn't supposed to cry. It hurt too much. But they came anyway. Days passed in slow motion. I couldn't move much, but every time I opened my eyes, I saw her there, sometimes sitting, sometimes asleep in a chair, sometimes just looking at me with that expression I hadn't seen since she was little. Guilt, yes. But something else too, a fragile kind of love trying to find its way back. One evening, she came to my bedside, her voice trembling. "Mom, they told me. The doctor told me it was you." I looked at her and smiled faintly. I figured he might. She began to cry. Why would you do that? You're sick too. You could've. I placed my hand on hers, weak but steady. Because you're my daughter. That's what mothers do. We give, even when we have nothing left. She pressed her forehead against my hand and sobbed, the kind of cry that comes from deep inside, where regret meets love. I'm so sorry, she whispered. For everything I said. For leaving you. For making you feel unwanted. I stroked her hair, the way I used to when she was little. You don't need to apologize, baby. Life makes us say things we don't mean when we're hurting. You are finding your way. I just wanted you to be happy. She shook her head. But I hurt you. I smiled gently. And yet, here we are. Still together. Still breathing. That's all that matters. For the first time in years, she climbed into the bed beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. We stayed like that, the machines humming softly around us, the world outside fading away. I felt her tears soak my gown, and I let them. Every tear felt like a tiny piece of forgiveness, washing away the distance between us. Recovery was slow. The doctors said I'd need more rest than most. My remaining kidney was weak, but working. Emily recovered faster. She stayed in my room long after she was allowed to leave hers, refusing to go home until I could walk without trembling. One morning, a nurse came in with breakfast and found Emily spoon-feeding me oatmeal, laughing softly as she accidentally spilled some on my blanket. It was such a small thing, but in that laughter, I heard something I hadn't heard in years: love without duty, care without shame. When we were finally discharged, she didn't let me go back to my empty house. You're coming with me, she said firmly. No arguments. I tried to protest, but she wouldn't listen. She set up a room for me, not the guest room, not a corner, a real room, with fresh flowers on the nightstand and my favorite quilt on the bed. You deserve to feel at home, she said quietly. At first, I worried things would go back to the way they were before. Awkward silences, unspoken resentment. But they didn't. Something had shifted. She started calling me Mom again, not M. She'd bring me tea in the mornings, sit with me after dinner, tell me about her work, her friends. I didn't realize how much I'd missed the sound of her voice until it became a part of my days again. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. She turned to me and said, You know, I used to think love meant doing what made me happy. But now I see it's also about being there for the people who made me who I am. I smiled and squeezed her hand. It's okay to find your happiness, sweetheart. Just don't forget the hearts that built the bridge to it. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I won't forget again. The months that followed were quiet but full of shared meals, laughter, late-night talks. Sometimes we'd argue, sometimes we'd fall silent, but even our silences had warmth now. She'd help me with my medicine, and I'd remind her to eat properly, just like the old days. Life had come full circle. Still, I could feel my strength fading slowly. The doctors warned me that with one weak kidney, my time might be shorter than hers. I didn't tell her that part. Some truths are better carried quietly. I didn't want her to live with fear again. I just wanted her to live, fully, freely, lovingly. One night, I woke to find her sitting by my bed, watching me sleep. You okay, honey? I whispered. She nodded, eyes wet. I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You already thanked me, sweetheart. By being here. She smiled through her tears. I'll never call you a burden again. I chuckled softly. Oh, darling, you don't need to promise that. Just love me while I'm here. She leaned forward and kissed my forehead. Always, Mom. The next morning, I watched her leave for work, her hand waving at me from the driveway, the same hand I once held when she learned to walk. I sat by the window long after she was gone, smiling to myself. Because sometimes love doesn't need to be perfect to be real. It just needs to survive. Seasons changed, and time did what it always does. It moved forward quietly, like a tide that doesn't ask permission before it pulls you along. Emily and I settled into a rhythm that felt peaceful. The mornings began with the smell of coffee and sunlight slipping through the curtains, and evenings ended with the two of us watching old shows together, laughing at jokes we'd heard 100 times. It was ordinary, but it was everything I'd ever wanted. Some nights, when she was asleep, I'd walk out to the porch, wrap a shawl around my shoulders, and look at the stars. The air would be cool, carrying the faint sound of crickets and distant cars. I used to feel small under that vast sky, but now, I just felt thankful. I had been given time, a little more of it, to see my daughter love again, to feel her hand in mine, to know that she no longer saw me as a burden. One afternoon, I went for a checkup. The doctor spoke gently, but his eyes told me what I already knew. My remaining kidney was failing faster than expected. He said they could try medication, but it would only buy me time. How long? I asked. He hesitated, then said softly, maybe a year. Maybe less. On the drive home, I didn't cry. I'd cried enough in my life. Instead, I felt this strange calm, the kind that comes when you realize you've already been given your miracle. When I reached home, Emily was cooking dinner, singing softly to a song on the radio. I stood at the doorway and watched her, her sleeves rolled up, her hair messy, her laughter echoing in the kitchen. For a moment, I forgot about everything else. I just thought, she's happy. And that was enough. I didn't tell her what the doctor said. Not because I wanted to hide it, but because I wanted her to live without the shadow of fear. She had spent enough years blaming herself for what she said that night, calling me a burden. I didn't want her to spend the rest of her life waiting for me to die. So I lived. One day at a time. We went on short walks, baked cookies that always came out a little burnt, watched movies we never finished. She started calling me every day from work just to check in. Sometimes she'd send flowers for no reason. Sometimes she'd just sit beside me, resting her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was little. I could feel my strength slipping away, but my heart was full. One evening, she came home early with tears in her eyes. I asked her what happened, and she handed me a letter. "Mom," she whispered, "I've been approved for the transplant program. I can donate my kidney to you. It's a match." I froze. My heart stuttered. "Sweetheart," I started, but she shook her head, crying. "No, it's my turn. You gave me life once, let me give it back." I looked at her, this woman who had once been my little girl, fragile, angry, lost, now standing before me, strong and filled with love. I took her hands and kissed them. "You already gave it back, baby. Every day you've been here with me, that's been my second life." She wouldn't take no for an answer, but the doctors did. They said my body was too weak now for another surgery. She broke down when she heard, sobbing into my chest like she used to when she scraped her knee as a child. I held her close, whispering, "It's okay. You've already done enough." After that, she became even more protective, cooking my meals, organizing my medicine, sitting with me at night until I fell asleep. She'd whisper, "Don't you dare leave me yet." And I'd smile, pretending I could promise that. Winter came early that year. The air was cold, and my body ached, but there was warmth inside our little home, a kind of peace that only forgiveness can bring. One morning, I woke to find her sitting beside me, holding a cup of tea. She looked tired but peaceful. "Good morning, Mom," she said softly. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied. She smiled and reached for my hand. "You know, I think I finally understand what love really means." "What's that?" I asked. "It's not about who gives more," she said, squeezing my fingers. "It's about never giving up on someone, even when it hurts." I smiled faintly. Then I guess we both learned. The days grew shorter, the nights longer. My body was giving up, but my spirit wasn't. Every breath felt like a gift, every sunrise a little miracle. One night, I sat by her bed instead of mine, watching her sleep. Her face was calm, soft, peaceful. I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you, Emily," I whispered. "You found your way." When morning came, I didn't wake up. Not really. Not in the way that counts. My body stayed, but I had drifted somewhere softer, somewhere where pain didn't reach. She told me later, or so I imagined she did, that she found me with a smile on my face, the sunlight spilling across the blanket, my hand still resting near the cup of tea she made me. She said she cried, but not the same way she used to. She cried with love, not regret. In the weeks that followed, she wrote about me. She told her friends about the woman who gave her life twice, once when she was born, and once when she was dying. She started volunteering at the hospital's transplant unit, helping families who were waiting, just like we once had. She said it helped her heal. Sometimes, I imagine her sitting on the porch now, the same one where I used to watch the stars, holding a cup of tea and talking to the sky. Maybe she tells me about her day. Maybe she says she misses me. And maybe, just maybe, she feels me there, in the breeze that brushes her hair, in the warmth of the sun that touches her cheek. Because love doesn't disappear when the body does. It lingers, in the laughter we shared, the lessons we taught, the forgiveness we gave each other. So if she ever feels alone, I hope she remembers this. I was never her burden. I was her beginning. And she was my reason to stay alive long enough to teach her what love truly means.